Nasreen is from Nepal, and at age 10, she fell into the hands of the textile industry and became a child laborer. Nasreen slept, ate, and worked in the same room, and she described, or which she has described, as a prison cell in a clandestine factory in Kathmandu. She worked from 11 or 12 to 15 hours a day with no rights at all. And she has said in interviews that her fingers were bleeding and they forced her to work grueling hours for less than $2 a day. The rules were simple: no pay unless they finished their entire job. And the factory, those who were running the factory, played loud music to keep workers from falling asleep and splashed cold water on their faces to wake them up. Food was scarce, and Nasreen and the other children there were pulling threads from their mouth as they ate. Chemical fumes sometimes stifled their breathing, and at the end of the workday, Nasreen would collapse on the mountains of clothes she had made and used them as a bed. And Nasreen has used her experience to found Empowerment Collective, an organization striving to eradicate modern-day slavery by empowering marginalized women in Nepal and in India.
I have the pleasure of serving on the Art for Peace Committee at IPI, and it's a great honor to be here this evening. Really trying to dedicate myself to the connection between art and developing mutual understanding and peace. As Gerhard Richter said, art is a very strong statement of hope. And certainly what Nasreen is doing is that. I was deeply moved by the veil that she presented today, because I never thought about how when we put something on in the morning, we think of our own image, of how we look, how we are perceived. We don't think of the invisible young children and the women and the people that are behind the clothing that we're wearing. And so the veil actually for me was really a symbol of the invisibility of the suffering, which seeing her artwork today and hearing her speak really unveiled and opened my eyes to looking at what's surrounding me and really unlocking a new way of looking at things. And so I feel transformed, and I hope others will too.
I lead our Women, Peace, and Security program, and this is an agenda that not so many people know about, especially in the US where we are today. But the idea was, in 2000, to bring women's experiences as a part of how we think about peace and security. So I think what Nasreen is telling us today and demonstrating is that women's experience and their agency has to be central to things that are happening in the Security Council across the street, happening in conversations around policies. And so at IPI, we try to bring those experiences into the Women, Peace, and Security agenda and make sure that agenda stays strong and that UN member states and UN officials are honoring the commitments they made in 2000 around women, peace, and security and women's participation in these spaces. And we really saw today how Nasreen has been through this experience, but now she has agency to speak out about it, and it's up to policymakers and people like IPI to be listening and taking her stories into policy spaces.
Dr. Hannah Rose Thomas, a celebrated artist and human rights advocate, who's also a friend of International Peace Institute, Grace Farms Foundation, and Nasreen, helped us initiate this series in 2022, an exhibition of her portraits, Yazidi, Rohingya, and Nigerian women. Her portraits conveyed sacred attention and meditation on the universal human experiences of suffering, grief, and loss. Nasreen spoke shortly after Hannah launched her book, Tears of Gold, at Grace Farms. It was a moment in time of interconnectedness, encouragement, and even some spontaneity, which will result in a portrait of Nasreen created by Hannah. I offered Nasreen an artist residency at Grace Farms in October, thinking about the restorative feeling of October light. I invited Marilyn Nelson, a former poet laureate of the state of Connecticut, to serve as Nasreen's mentor. And 3 days later, Nasreen emerged with a poem. Through this poem, may we be reminded of how art can substantially move us toward the peace that we all want to build in the world. Thank you, Nasreen.
I have seen chains, not just metal, but silence and deep hunger. Peace is not given nor made by the rulers who have governed the world, nor is it bought with the weight of gold or the power of throne. It was not lost in the dust. It must now be fully remembered. No one must vanish, no one left behind in the shadowed remains, or peace will never be found. It will be fade like a dream left to die. Come sit with me, for the table is wide and the seats are still warm. Bring all you carry, the pain and the sorrow, the anger, the grief. Lay them down here, for this table is strong and can carry the weight. This is not built for the hands that have profited of our pain. It is for hands that have built and for voices the world left unheard. Let truth be spoken. Let all that has hidden be seen in the light. The world is in chains, not just you, not just me, but each living step. Some chains are heavy. They crush down the bones and the bodies of the poor. Some are in silence. Some live in the things that we buy and consume. Some are the weights of the hands that are bound by the greed of the world. How can we sit in our comfort while earth that sustains us still cries? To honor her is to hear how she speaks in the wind and the waves. She is not a wealth. She is not to be spent, to be burned, or to be sold. She is a mother whose heart still forgives through we poison her veins. What will remain when the rivers grow sick and the fish float to die? A river sings of the ones left behind, waiting lost in the dark. The roots of humankind shrink into silence and thirst for the past. When water is free, it carries the voice of the one who still dreams. How can there be hunger, famine, when seeds still sprout from the soil? Let the land give, let the hunger be gone, let the tables be filled. The table must be prepared for the ones who have nothing to eat, where nourishment flows as freely as rain from the sky in the spring. How can cities still rise, yet so many have no walls for the night? None should be wandering lost in the cold while the towers stand tall. Home is not only four walls, but a place where the heart may be free, a place to lay down the burdens too heavy to carry alone. How will we stand if the right to be healed is a privilege sold? How will we rise when the body is weak and the spirit is worn? Let there be healing, not wealth that decide who lives and who fades. Let there be a strength, not for one, but for all who struggle to breathe. How can we rise if the mind is in chains and the classroom is locked? Without the teachers, the book, and the pens, how will wisdom survive? True freedom lives in the power to learn and the right to be taught. Let there be knowledge where wisdom, peace rise with pure love. Do the machine learn from how we connect or how we divide? Can we create what will honor the soul, not just logic and speed? Let all we build serve the healing of life not the profit of pain. Let all we build be the mirrors of kindness, not of our greed. No key alone can unlock every chain binding the wounded world. No hand alone can release all burdens still crushing the weak. Trust must be seen, and the things we consume must be chosen with care. Every supply links many names, every thread holds a precious life. A table for peace has been set by the hands that the world ignores, not by the rulers or kings, but by those who suffer still unseen. We do not wait for permission to rise, to be heard, to be free. We all know peace was never built, it waits to be remembered. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, dear friends, members of the IPI Art for Peace Committee, it's lovely to see you all here and a warm welcome to you on behalf of the International Peace Institute, but also our two partners, Brace Farms, and also Empowerment Collective, the organization founded by our featured artist, but also a human rights advocate, a documentary filmmaker, and a survivor herself of modern-day slavery, Nasreen Sheikh. According to the ILO, the International Labour Organization, that nearly 50 million people are believed to be victims of this type of exploitation. Nasreen is careful to note that her art and her advocacy is not about her. It's about those 50 million others. And as we admire both the work that she has presented here on the stage, it's all on behalf of those people. Nasreen, it is a great privilege, indeed a huge privilege for us to be hosting you and your art today. Your life story is as compelling as it is or was at one stage harrowing. Your art, the expression of a liberty denied you cruelly when you were so young. Building a culture of peace and reconciliation through art, featuring artist and activist Nasreen Sheikh. Nasreen. And with your permission, I'd like to get to the poem in a short while. But before we do that, if you could also turn everyone's attention to the veil. And it's striking, it dominates the space. The weaves are extraordinary. And you chose the theme of a veil for a very specific reason. If you could explain to the audience the thought behind it and how it relates to your advocacy and to the people that you're protecting and wanting to defend.
Yeah, veil is, this is something that I have been working for the last time when I was at the Grace Farm. What Grace Farm is really a space for where Sharon would be here, and I would say like a space communicates. That's her, and it just stuck with me since then. It does not just communicates, but it also gives the ability to create. And so from there, the Table for Peace poem came. You know, from there also this veil came, and the idea of the veil was when I was just. When I came to America for the first time and I walk to these major department store and I see these clothings and these products, I did not see that as a piece or as an object or as something beautiful that I wanted. I saw literally like human suffering that was piled on these places, and I felt very, very overwhelmed. So then I stopped going into this department store and I started to go to more of the thrifting places and the places that is more conscious and more aware. And I was seeking for like, what is the artisan communities? Where is the movement? Where's this all these people? And so in New Haven, there is really great place where like you had thousands of pieces of just like left like discarded, you know. And I found one of the piece of this hand stitched, and it reminded me of something that you know, when I was in the sweatshop, I had to live through a survival, and I was not aware of the art. And when I see that piece, I was like, oh, I want to make something out of it, and I had no idea. And then slowly this one piece turned into the next, and I was thinking like how back in time women used to stitch things, and they would not just stitch and make objects. That's how they would connect, and they would talk about the things. They would talk about what other things needed to be changed and transform. And so I started to build this, and I was like, I'm going to use this piece to cover. If you see, her face is completely covered because I have, for the, I think, last 20 years, I have been working in Nepal and India. Even though I might look a little young, but when you start from 10-year-old, you know, it feels like we're long. I feel very, very old in my inside. So I wanted to give this. A lot of my women wanted to talk about their stories, but they did not want it to be on the camera. They didn't want it to be on the social media or any of those things. They were like, I'm going to share these stories, but please do not share with anybody. So I was like, I'm not going to just keep their story in my heart. It just needs to be released somewhere in some form, you know. So I created this veil. So the veil is going to be testimonies of all these women that I have worked for all these years and share these stories through this film. The film will be called ANAVARANA, and which means unveil in Nepali.
It's a beautiful story, Nasreen, but I have to say I was a little bit surprised because in my experience, spending time with people who were once placed in a vulnerable situation, the tendency I felt used to be in the opposite direction, that we have suffered grievously and we were objectified, we were units of production, or we were sort of enslaved in a sexual sense in a condition of war. And we have names and we have identities and we want to be recognized. But you've gone in a different direction because listening to them, you felt they needed protection almost. And that's what you're saying, essentially. That the message needs to be conveyed, but you don't want to in one way further their vulnerabilities. Right, by exposing. Have I got it right in that sense?
Yes, because when I started to speak out about the issues that I have experienced, there was a lot of threat from my own communities and from the also like some of the businesses were not very happy what I was talking about, and it would come on them, you know. So the women had a very similar feeling like I will be outcasted, but I don't have a document that I can run out, you know, and so they don't have the finance, they don't have the education, so they feel very vulnerable. But their story is so extremely heart-wrenching, which Hannah Rose last year when she was here, she has spoken very well about it. It's like those stories expand into India, Nepal, Bangladesh, in all these countries. So I felt like, you know, coming from that community, speaking the language, not just coming from the, you know, I come from a village which is undocumented where women have absolutely no rights, you know, no rights. Like I still remember one of my aunt just wanted to wear a lipstick and she was murdered for that, because they were not allowed to wear makeup. Because if the women wear makeup or they put lipstick on, they will be too beautiful, and then there will be other abuse. So they were like, no, keep it as simple possible. And so things like that really made me like, I want to create a protections for these women where the world needs to know these stories so they can be held accountable or they can transform. But these survivors don't need to be vulnerable to carry another form of trauma, because the more you speak, it's not easy to speak out when you have the community that does not support you.
And perhaps art can make us think, just pause for a while and think and just reflect a little bit more on this connection between human suffering And what you're trying to do, which is show us the highest expression of our existence, which is, a sense of beauty and representation. I was struck by your poem because I think, Nasreen, the idea of a table creating a sort of sense of also equality, a sense of removal of sort of the sort of disproportionate powers that often affect the dynamics between humans. You were influenced by Marilyn. You were recovering from your infections and you had high fever. How did this poem come about? And did it come out in one flow, or were
No, it didn't come in one flow. As I said, like I have been through, there was, times where I would have one pieces come and then next time second pieces would come. So it has I think that poem has really evolved through the veil, and A Table for Peace is really an intention that I set up when I was at the Grace Farm. And when I gave the presentation at the opening, I had a dream that one day the table where artists, journalists, activists, everybody could sit together and not differentiate different issues. Like all issues is human issues, and if humans have issues, the climate has issues. We all need to have a conversation about how to protect this. And so I wanted to create this table where we all can have an equal voice. Equality is so important, and nothing is more ahead or this. We all need to have a circular conversation. We need to be heard and seen. So I wanted to create this A Table for Peace where all different kinds of sectors could come and join and have a conversation about it. And as I said, I used the Manda Kranta Chanda style because Chanda is actually I have adopted one girl in Nepal, and her name is Chandni, which means full moon. And Chanda, I call her as a nickname. And so when that was coming, I was like, oh, this is exactly. And when I was reading the history, very famous poet from India, Kalidas, he wrote a lot of poems that is it's all written in Sanskrit, which is one of the ancient language. You might be aware of that. Very, very ancient language, has a lot of power. And I was like, I should write about it. And I embedded in that poem 7 keys, which is, I feel like when I started my first business, social business, local women's handicraft, I saw that when women were coming, they were saying like, I need money, but I also need housing, and I also need good food, I also need this. So we created in a system in local women's handicraft that if you are getting paid, make sure that you charge on the piece that you can attain all these 7 things: food, education, health, shelter. And it's like literally like only if women are making $7 an hour, they just need to add like $2 more to make it attain, And once they have it, they are not just the worker, they are actually becoming the leader. And once they're leader, their children can go to better schools. And I have seen that these women have cut the thread where next generation don't have to ever fall into that direction. So I feel like from that 7 keys came where the water is so important, food is so important. I remember when I was when I didn't have food in the sweatshop, how angry I felt, how intense that experience it was. Like, try to take a fast for a few days without anything and see how much it takes on you.
Nasreen, you're an absolutely astonishing person. I'm not going to monopolize this discussion, so I want to open up to the audience here. They're a talkative bunch normally, but I think you've left us a little bit speechless, given your experiences, but also your artwork is amazing. But is there someone who would like to volunteer the first question? Always the most difficult thing, and then they start coming fast. And yeah, Katja?
To me, when I was looking at the veil, I thought Zaid had an interesting question, because the veil usually is something that for women who, have the freedom, the veil is a way of
hiding. But to me, as you were telling us the story, it also made me think of the invisibility when we buy something, that this is a hidden problem in our society. And I wonder if that is also a dimension of the work and something that needs to be unveiled here. Of every time we buy something, we don't think of, necessarily who made it and the suffering they have, and that it's sort of an invisible problem. So thank you for dedicating your art and touching us and teaching us.
Thank you for giving that. It is about unveiling, and I feel like there's a lot of things are invisible in our society. One of the example that I feel is when I'm in Nepal with the farmers. The farmers will grow the food and then they will bring to the market. And as they bring to the market, I get to see the person that who grew it and then get to talk to them. And it creates a very personal bond of a story. And then I go to American stores here and I just wrapped up into the plastics, and the food is like perfectly packaged and I have no idea what is this made and who produced, and almost I feel helpless. It's like I wish I could know who is behind it, because it's definitely somebody somewhere is producing these things. And I feel like it is a consumer right to know what supply chains they are supporting. And a lot of the companies they're talking about the first tier of the supply chain, but the bottom of the supply chain is so much suffering going on. The hardest thing that I feel is that how these culture and the peace and the language are dying in these communities because of this. And doilies, and we use in our center a 100-year-old loom which does not need any electricity. These these looms are like a tool for the women to self-empowerment. And these are being taken out right now. These are becoming endangered. So how do we preserve these cultures and how do we show that? So this veil is really about unveiling. That is why the name of the film ANAVARANA, and it is a Nepali name, even though it seems like very English name, but it is a Nepali name and it means unveil. And we will be unveiling of these all survivors' stories so the consumers can really understand that everything that we consume is energy, and that energy is how and what cost we are consuming, that everybody have the responsibilities to know, and they should demand. They should demand. We just recently on the March 8th we launched End Modern Slavery Now movement and campaign, and that is really about mapping the mandatory supply chain labeling. In that label, everybody should know who made that products and how it's going. And I really feel like women have a lot of power, because for many generations we have changed so many things, and we could demand like what are the things is in our household, that we are consuming that contains slavery, because we don't want to feed your children a food that can create suffering, or you don't want to make your children wear clothes that is harming another children in the sweatshop. So I feel like women needs to unite globally to demand these mandatory supply chain labeling, and we are not going to stop until we have this. And UN is behind us, right behind there. So by 2030, hopefully we all will know. I mean, like, I'm very curious in this room, how many of you know the clothes that you are wearing right now? Who made it for you? It's happening on a global level, and I feel like the world, the more they will find out that they can impact through their purchase, through their dollars. And these 28 million people who are in forced labor, they're looking for you. They're looking for your leadership, because they are stuck in the sweatshop. When I was in the sweatshop, I have no strength at all to break or open the window, because our windows were so locked up. We just had no courage. So they're locked up. They can't speak, and it's so invisible. It's so deeply invisible. But when you travel to these countries, you do see some of it, but not all of it.
you have become this powerful voice of advocacy through both direct action and through the creation of your foundations and your initiatives, as well as the presentation and the expression of your art. Do you see others who are following you, sort of younger Nasreens who are basically picking up this challenge of using both advocacy, and you have a powerful voice, but also art as a means of creating a sort of space and a bridge with people who may not immediately understand what you're trying to do?
Yeah, a lot of back in when I was on the ground and working in the beginning, there was a lot of struggle. First of all, I would open my shop and the locals would come and they will threat, like, shut down the store. You're a girl, you should be married, you know. I would go try to buy the raw materials for my fabric. They would hold my hand. So there was a lot of struggle in the beginning, and nobody was trusting because I was really struggling. I started from, you know, being a victim of the sweatshop to the street kid to meeting. It takes only one person to believe in you, and that was one of my teacher who I saw in the street. You know, no, I don't know him at all or anything, and he had a
This
dog.
was a teacher in the sweatshop.
No, he was
School teacher.
He was not. He was like a world traveler from America, from Connecticut, Hamden, traveling to Nepal. Yeah, traveling to Nepal. You know, he was researching about his own.
Is he here? No, he passed.
He passed
Oh,
away.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, he passed away in the time of COVID. I know he's in the best place ever. And so he's the one that he believed in me. And all I asked him, Uncle, can you teach me? And I was not asking for anything because I was so hungry for going to the school. Like, I just wanted to go to school, you know, because when you are 9 or 10-year-old, you see other kids, you know, and you want to go and do that. And so he gave me, and he believed in me, and he gave me the education. And since then, things changed. And so back to your questions around, is there young Nasreen now? The same uncle who used to say that sees a sin of this family because he's breaking our cultural, things, and running the business, because running a business in my communities as a woman is a sin, complete sin. You should be married, you should be under the wall, under the cover. As soon you go out, you are no more valued to the community. So a lot of the people would not only outcast me, but they started to outcast my mother and my relatives slowly, and they would not trust. But now, when through Empowerment Collective, I bring AIDS, and I have set up these water tables, you know, set up people for bathrooms, and build a lot of AIDS things. And then people slowly started to change that girls can do something, women can do something. So the same uncle who was against me, and he started to send her daughter to the school for the first time. And the other uncle had 5 sons, and he was so proud of his son that his son will do everything. And you know, these daughters are burdens, because in my community there is a lot of dowry you have to give. So my mother has 3 sisters. So she was very scared because she has nothing, and she's like, how can I make dowry for my girls? And so people were abusing her, that you are unlucky, you just have daughters, you know. And now they see this transformation, that we are bringing this help. There is a huge reflection on these communities that girls do have a strength, you know. They can transform if somebody can believe in them. I'm here, and I wish that my mother could know. I wish that my community could know that I'm sitting with Jade, who is the most humanitarian heart, with the peace, and the king with...
Stop it. Thank you, Nasreen, for turning up today. You're all welcome to go and have a... you're...
Like a dust with the king.
No, none of that. Nasreen, do you find that, because it's often a strange thing, when you're in a situation where there's extreme exploitation, that you often hear the odd voice of someone who's in that situation, who's sort of defending it, saying something along the lines, I would imagine, okay, we're hardly paid. We're paid, only $2 once the product is finished. But we're getting some income and we're working and feeding our families and so forth. In other words, they try and rationalize why it's okay. And then going to your point, they see, those who are like you, conscious that there's something desperately wrong, as disrupting what for them, they almost don't, and it suggests something that we have to be very careful of, that we somehow know better than other people, but it suggests that they're not aware of the fact that their conditions could be better, that there are basic human rights, that there are labor rights that should be observed, and that the factory owners are not abiding by them. And so they don't almost sense that they're being exploited, right? And then did you find that as you began to advocate and through your art and your expressions, that there was sort of almost hostility from some quarters, that, don't disrupt it for us? Or did you have universal support from all of those who, like you, were very young at one stage working in these sweatshops?
Yeah, no, there's, as I said, my condition in the beginning was very, very extreme, like extremely extreme, that I wish that never, and I pray for that all the time, that never happens to any children. I don't even know how old I am because my birth was never documented and my village was undocumented. And now looking back and reflecting that why these villages are undocumented and why the young girls are being forced into marriage. And it's really to preserve the forced labor, It's really around that. And I think that that's something... When people think, there is a huge gap, first of all. And I feel like survivors who actually lived it, who experienced it, like those experiences, it's not just in my mind, but it's embedded in my blood, in my body. It's alive right now, And so we are going to close that gap because people need to understand is what is extreme and what is fair. What we are asking for is the fair, And my condition in the sweatshop was like being locked up with nothing but only abuse. Like when I think of my childhood, it feels complete blank, And that's very sad thing to live with when you don't have any memories of that. And the fact that it is happening with 28 million people in the forced labor and 22 million of them are in forced marriage. These are like not numbers, and these are like people, spirit girls like me in these areas. And so I really think that people need to understand that what is extreme. When you buy $5 t-shirts, you need to think about like, is this I'm buying for myself or is it someone else suffering? Because when I was in the sweatshop, I was just, I didn't have any power, but what I had inherently is inner power, self-awareness, and everybody can pray inside. And the prayer that I was making when I was in the sweatshop is that anybody is going to wear this shirt and these clothes will not feel good, and they will feel my blood and pain and my suffering. So I feel like
you were cursing.
No, I was cursing back, and many children are cursing in this when they're crying and when they're sleeping in the hardest conditions and when they're living in the extreme abuse. They are cursing, and so I feel like the suffering that is happening in these vulnerable communities. I feel like how come in America when you go, there's a lot of disconnections, within this community also. So it's like nobody is perfect, and what is so important is to bridge that gap with much deeper understanding. And I think embedding those thoughts with survivors who can bring these real experiences and share like what is extreme and what is, fair job. Everybody needs it. The women at the center, they thrive on having a sustainable living job that they can come and work and support their families and grow, But when it's in the sweatshop, when it's like made by, work for 15 hours, that's just not, and a lot of the company, I mean, America, I think, still imports $129 billion of products every year that contain slavery. Globally, the 50 million people are producing $468 billion of products that contain slavery. So I often call it this as a like economic genocide that is happening in this community.
Yeah. And I mean, extraordinary. Who would like to? Yes, please.
Yes, so my name is Shazia Rafi. I'm former Secretary General of Parliamentarians for Global Action, the organization that did the ratification of the International Criminal Court and the Arms Trade Treaty. I just want to bring it to the level of what can we do about it at the international level, especially since we're just across the road from the UN. The ILO has a convention adopted in 1999 on the worst forms of child labor. All countries have signed it. It's the fastest treaty to have been ratified by all member countries. So I think, to some extent, what IPI and other institutions that are, listening to your testimony need to do and take from it is how do we force the implementation and legal cases to hold both governments and these businesses to account. And just to give you a sense of, how hard it is, even in this country, we've been trying to get the concept of a fair wage that acknowledges what unpaid labor women are putting into the work that we do, and that is still not here. We're still stuck at $7.5 per hour. So, it's the resistance of business to any form of fairness and equality is in every country, but the only hope we have are these international conventions and these agreements, which we must implement and hold governments to account on.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I feel like it's just not the government and civil society, like everybody I feel like needs to unite. But the most important that I feel like really consumer needs to become aware that they are consuming suffering or they're in some way and some form. So raising awareness is very important. And I think that's what Grace Farm, ILO, Walk Free, there's so many incredible organizations is coming together to solve these issues, because this is a major, major problem. This is an economic problem that is creating genocide in these communities, creating a lot of conflict, and a lot of cultures are being lost. One of the things that I saw was so devastating is in the time of COVID, when all these tiny small businesses were died. They were just not able to keep up, and I saw that how some of the bigger businesses were just taking over and just buying it. So it's just literally disseminated all these small businesses, and these small businesses means like these are run by the family who creates innovative and solutions, and there is a creation in it. So when everybody just becomes a workers of the factory, it loses the ability of create and art and movement and all of that. And I feel like it is so important to engage in multi-level through the arts, through the peace building, and just reconciliations. I feel like IPI has a huge role to play in this. How do we create fairness? How do we create peace that people in all world can be, just have a basic human rights? We are not asking for give us this. We're just asking that give us the basic human rights so we can be human and not machine. When I was in this WhatsApp, I felt like machine, and finally I feel like I'm becoming human, being here, and so you were talking about the U.S. government and U.S., the slavery exists within the U.S. also. There's a lot of garment workers that is working for not just $5-7, but like less than, and not only that America is importing slavery, and this is the country that I feel like consumers are, once they become consumers, these bigger corporations and bigger business needs to just open their heart, and bring some peace from within inside, that, when they're taking and when they're building their business, they don't have to take it from other people, they can build it from their fairness and strength and transparency. And that's where one of the program that we are doing with the Empowerment Collective is called Transparent Trade Initiative. And it has 3 tiers. One is about really raising awareness, which is uniting all women to come together on the March 8th to demand mandatory transparency supply chain labeling. And then the second one is to really bring all these governments and corporations and businesses to understand that, the genocide and the ecocide is the same issues, and this needs to be solved. One of the things that I'm working with our community is through also person-to-person intelligence. When we connect with one another, there is something that comes out. And how do we embed circular leadership, person-to-person approach in our businesses, that we can grow sustainably, ethically, more mindful, and not take over the planet, because overconsumption and over manufacturing, it's going only on the vein of the Mother Earth. It's all the resources. So it's like, I feel like we are creating our own genocide, and the more we can become aware. And I see in this room, you all are very, very well educated people, and you have a lot of strength and a lot of resources, and those resources are responsibilities, those are accountabilities, and how can you use that to serve the most vulnerable? Because these people, they just want to be seen, they just want to create peace. Yeah. The more we can connect like this, and the more we can talk and support leaders and survivors, I feel like that is the solution for future.
Excellencies, dear friends, Nasreen Sheikh, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
I think what Nasreen put forward that I'm taking away, and we can all take away, is the idea of questioning. And that's a big part of kind of feminist practice, is questioning, what is around us, who made it, who's telling us certain narratives. So I think all of us can take away from this experience, and lesson learned is to ask yourself those questions, which are often uncomfortable, but to keep asking them and then go search for answers.
We can choose not to buy things that are cheap just so we can have another t-shirt, but we can look and do more research and demand more answers on where our clothing are coming from, where the products that we surround ourselves are coming from. And maybe, some of the things that we are buying so much of are actually toxic, not only to us, but the people who make it. And so perhaps this is an opportunity for healing for all of us, and not only for the people, but for our planet. And I think Nasreen is really a great ambassador for this new movement. It's been done before, but she really coming and having the experience of being a survivor teaches us to really see it through her human experience.